This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before election day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Welcome to The Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, October the 23rd, 2020. On this edition of The Politicrat, a conversation with Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever. Dr. Avis, talking about Black women, about the Black agenda, politics, power, and the dangerous Ice Cube. All of that coming up next. I'm really honored to have the guest that I'm about to introduce to you on. Her name is Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever. Many know her as Dr. Avis. She is the co-founder of Max Black Media. She appears regularly on the great show called Roland Martin Unfiltered, and she has other platforms that she appears on: CNN, MSNBC, Black Enterprise, Essence, NBC Black. She's been on TED Talks. She is a mentor and an author. And I am so honored to introduce her to you right now, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever. Dr. Avis, thank you so very much for being here on the Politicrat podcast.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. So we have a few things we want to talk about. And one of the things that I did want to ask you, first of all, is to talk about a bit about your company and about Max Black Media, what they do. I think that would be a really good starting point today.
Absolutely. So we're excited because it is in startup mode. So we're looking to launch officially in 2021. But Max Black Media is, I think, going to be revolutionary in the space, the digital space. It looks to be an amazing multi-platform streaming service that is going to provide programming across a wide array of areas that centers the Black experience. So we'll be covering politics, of course, but we'll be moving beyond that. So we'll have Max Black Politics, we'll have Max Black Family, we'll have Max Black Wealth, we'll have Max Black Beauty. So we'll have Max Black Global, we'll have Max Black Africa. So what I'm super excited about as we roll out these other platforms over the next few months and years, when everything fully comes out. The idea is that it's a place where anyone from around the world can go to really get a sense of the Black experience from Black perspectives and center Blackness, not only in terms of the American experience, but also lift up what the beauty and the brilliance of Blackness is like all around the world. So we're super excited about it.
Wonderful. I'm super excited about it. I can't wait for this all to lift off and launch, and I'll definitely love to talk to you about that again in the future, because I think it's very, very important, all the things you just talked about. I want to lean into the next thing to talk about, and that's really, before we get to some of the other things, Black women in leadership. Look, we've had centuries of a rich tradition. We go back to the African continent of Black women leading armies, leading nations, leading proudly. We see this all over the planet. It has not stopped. It grows in abundance. We here in the United States, we can go back to Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and, Ida B. Wells. And oh my gosh, there's so many names that we could name drop, you and I, over the next,
Absolutely.
I mean,
that'll take us your entire podcast.
Yeah. Fannie Lou Hamer. I mean, Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan. Oh, there's so many people. But Ella Baker. We can go on. Dr. Betty Shabazz, Coretta Scott King. I just want to name the roll. Just call the roll.
That's right. Honor the queens. Absolutely.
Can you talk about that some more? I mean, because this is something that continues with yourself and Alicia Garza, so many different people, right? And I'm sorry that I've missed out other Black women. But can you talk about Black women in leadership? And that's something that's the backbone of this nation, of our very existence as Black people. Women leading and leading unmistakably and proudly. Can you talk a bit about Black women in leadership?
Absolutely. First of all, I'm humbled to even be thought of in that list. I mean, incredible, just brilliant women who have left everlasting reverberations on the earth in terms of what they have contributed to the advancement of our people. But I would have to say it is really a beautiful thing. In fact, it's so beautiful, I wrote a whole book about it, okay? And my book is called How Exceptional Black Women Lead, in which I really sort of delve down into the essence of what Black women's leadership looks like. And here's the thing, as you recognize here, we're born leaders, right? We have been leading for centuries. And oftentimes, though, we lead without that official designation. We lead without the official recognition of the contributions that we make in various ways, contributions that, as you mentioned, have changed the world. And so I think what's so brilliant and amazing and perhaps to an extent unique about the way Black women lead is that Black women are really about getting it done. Oftentimes, we're more focused on getting the work done than getting the credit. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, although I would like more of our leaders to get the recognition and the kudos. But the bottom line is we preference the advancement over the pomp and circumstance. And so to me, that is really the essence of a true leader. And also, I believe that's what's beautiful about our leadership is that we understand that when we move forward, we want to bring other people with us. And we tend to be more in the vein of inclusive leadership. We tend to be more in the vein of servant leadership. We tend to be in the tradition of lifting as we climb. So that is just how we do it. We don't tend to be sort of this I want to be the center of attention and I'm the only one who has the say and everybody fall in line behind me. We build leaders as we lead. And to me, that is the beauty of what Black women's leadership looks like. And it's our responsibility as the recipients of so much hard work from so many sisters who have got us to where we are right now, to at least do them the respect, as you just did, of honoring their accomplishments, learning about them, because as I mentioned, oftentimes they're not the ones that are highlighted in the history books, but they have done incredible work to create the advantages that unfortunately many of us take for granted today.
And so many, as you point out, people who are unsung and not, and as you say, a lot of the women that we've talked that I mentioned, some of the, many people not interested in credit. They're getting the work done and shaping the future for all of us as Black people and by a larger extent, the nation. There's a lot of great contributions and leadership things that Black women have done. I mean, I think instantly of Harriet Tubman and what she did during the Civil War and just after that. And, her leadership is immense and doesn't get the real credit. I mean, she gets talked about, but not the kind of credit that, say, someone who is white would clearly get. for doing things that she did.
Yeah, she's incredible. We typically only know the tip of the iceberg of what she, people think of her, okay, Moses, she saved slaves. Look, she did. She did lead enslaved people to freedom, but she also did so much more, as you mentioned, in terms of just her fierceness on the battlefield in the Civil War and so much more. So absolutely.
Right. So, I want to try to transition what we've been talking about here to something that I think it's not a crisis necessarily, but I think it is an issue that is worth airing, is worth talking about, just to kind of get it out there and see what happens. We've recently had a number of people in the hip hop community, not very many.
I know where we're going.
an abrupt hard turn to
Now you're just about to come out. Okay.
yeah. So we have recently had one or two, not many, but one or two who said that somehow the plans that are being laid out by the Democratic nominee, Mr. Joe Biden, somehow are really substandard, or that they have plans that are much better than the ones that Mr. Biden and company have. I mean, I'm not being as clear as I could be. Look, Joe Biden's put out plans for Black America, plans to empower Black people, to empower Black men. There have been very detailed plans. And then there's been something called the Platinum Plan, which we understand may have been written by Mr. Kanye West. I don't know how true that is. I have heard that. But I just want to ask you about all of this.
That would explain a lot.
Roland Martin had shared this on Twitter. He shared a tweet that someone said that this thing had been written by Mr. West. I don't know how true all of this is, but that's something I saw. But all of this is to say, Dr. Avis, what is your take on Ice Cube and others who have been saying these things lately? Because I'm irritated, quite frankly, by the fact that there are this small percentage of Black men who are actually either thinking about voting for Trump. I've heard a conversation back earlier this year between Drew McCaskill and Karen Hunter on Sirius XM talking about this, and how there are a subsegment of Black men who kind of view Trump and they romanticize him. Some people who do hip hop, there's some people in hip hop who sings rap songs about him. Can you talk about this and Ice Cube and what all of this is, please? I hope I'm being clear. I don't.
Oh, you're crystal clear. Absolutely. So Ice Cube is problematic for a couple of different reasons. I grew up in sort of the era of what I consider to be the golden age of hip hop, when hip hop was something that made you proud to be a Black person, when hip hop was something that talked about our history and made us and really focused us on important things, important issues, when hip hop was a place that could actually bring social consciousness. I mean, it served a good in our cultural space. So I'm talking about people like Public Enemy. I'm talking about people like Boogie Down Productions. I'm talking about people like, Afro Puffs even, I'm just, that sort of era, era. So, obviously to me, that era of loving on Black people through hip hop ended with NWA. When it devolved into, I believe, a very toxic masculinity that oftentimes focused on especially denigrating Black women in particular. And I cannot imagine an entire industry that could produce billions of dollars be built on calling, let's be honest, white women bitches and hoes for like 20 years. I cannot imagine an industry like that being allowed to flourish. But that's exactly what hip hop, in my mind, evolved into upon the introduction of NWA to the mix, which then immediately meant that those more socially conscious, like the early Tupacs and all that stuff, that more socially conscious era in rap, you couldn't find it on the radio anymore. Everything that was kind of driven underground, and everything that you were hearing on the radio was basically positioning Black women as strippers and hoes. I mean, that's basically it. Ice Cube's entree into the public sphere was in that space, right? Through NWA. So obviously after a few years, he made a shift into a bit more of a social conscious space after he left NWA. However, he continued his denigration of Black women in his lyrics. Now, I will say that fast forward to today and what's going on with the whole his entree into presidential politics. Here's my thing. If Ice Cube had a history of doing things for the Black community, of being involved in policy and, advocating for the Black community, then I would at least believe that his concern right now was based in something real, okay? I find it odd that here at a moment in which we are facing the most critical presidential election in any of our lifetimes, if for no other reason than the fact that 1 out of every 1,000 Black people in America are infected with COVID, out of the fact that we're 3 times more likely to die from it than our white counterparts are, or the fact that the majority of children who die from COVID are Black and brown children, at a time when literally Black people are dying because of the incompetence. And I don't even know if it's incompetence. I really, honestly, if you want to just say if I had a conspiracy theory, I think one of the reasons why this administration never really attacked COVID because they knew who was dying and we were expendable. Now, to me, someone who's on that side is an enemy to Black people, period. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are, because you're talking about Black people dying. Now you're talking about killing Black people. And if you want a regime to stay in power that is literally killing Black people, I have a problem with you, number one. Number two, my concern here then is, what are his motivations and what is he doing? We know that in 2016, there was a concerted effort by the Trump campaign to specifically suppress the Black vote through the use of Russian bots and other online mechanisms that were specifically meant, if not to get Black people to vote for Trump, to discourage Black people from voting at all. In fact, out of all of the demographic groups that they target in their misinformation efforts, their largest budget was for Black people. So they were specifically looking to suppress our vote. Now you fast forward to 2020, now they know people are hip to the game in terms of their Russian collusion thing. So what's the next best thing they can do? The next best thing they can do is to get some real Black people, some Black people with very famous faces, some Black people with huge platforms to do their dirty work for them. And when I look at Ice Cube's relationships in particular, I find it odd. That someone whose business partner in his 3-on-3 basketball league is also the business partner and best friend to Steve Bannon, Trump's known political advisor for years. I find it odd that relationship exists, and now all of a sudden, Ice Cube wants to be some savior to Black people by, in essence, I believe, engaging in voter suppression tactics, targeting Black people, attempting to get us to either get frustrated with both sides and not vote at all, or to support Donald Trump. I think that I see that with him. And I think that it is odd that other folks are out here talking this foolishness. I'm not surprised, for example, by 50 Cent, because he is well known to be an idiot and just a hateful, ugly human being. Anybody that treats his own son as awfully as he treats his son publicly is not a decent human being. So everybody knows who he is. But I would say that the thing that annoys me, that not even annoys me, it makes me angry about the whole Ice Cube situation, is I believe he is being deceitful to his followers and to the general public. I believe that he has something to gain from this situation. I believe that he does not come to this from a place of authenticity. I certainly believe that in a democracy, people can vote for who they want to vote for. I certainly believe that you can try to encourage other people to vote for who you want to vote for. That is, you have that right. But if you are going to position yourself like you are fighting for Black people, when you have connections that you have not disclosed to Black people, that in fact may influence why you are taking the positions that you're taking, and at the same time, your efforts are in line with pushing forward the possibility that someone who is responsible specifically for killing Black people might get 4 more years to continue killing Black people, then I have a problem with you. And that's why I have a problem with Ice Cube.
I totally agree. I mean, this is troubling. This is troubling what Ice Cube is doing, to say the least. And it does anger me too, Dr. Avis, because it angers me in so many different ways, obviously for the reasons that you've talked about, but that there are some Black men out there, or young Black men, who might, the small percentage of them who in their minds might go, and then absolutely check out and not vote. When in fact, to not vote is to be an agent of your own demise, perhaps?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, here's the thing. If you don't vote, fine. Who you hurting, boo? That means that all you're doing is you're providing other people the power to have decision-making power over your life. You know, I'm the type of person, I don't say that I'm a control freak. However, if I'm in the car, I want to be the one driving, okay? I like to have my fate in my own hands. I'm not that comfortable in the passenger seat, okay?
Right.
So to me, voting is like that too. It's like, do you really want to give your power away to other people to do with it what they will? And let's also be very frank, and this is not revolutionary to say, you know, Black men especially are targeted in this society. Why in the world would you want to allow other people to have the power to put in place policies that would even further hurt your ability to navigate the society without the possibility, once again, of being killed in any various sundry other ways? I mean, you know, and other things, without the possibility of being able to get a good job, without the possibility of being able to grow your businesses, to build wealth, to live in a safe neighborhood, to, you know, navigate life without having to face the day-to-day onslaught of racism in its most violent and hateful forms. I mean, it's just very important for you to understand that, yes, there are people who do not have your interests, who actually, I would argue, are working directly, diametrically opposed to your interests. So to me, as someone who I think I would just describe myself at base, I'm a fighter. I am just natural born fighter. I you know, that's just who I am. I cannot imagine being in a situation where I'm just going to sit here and surrender and allow somebody just to have their way with me. That's basically what you're doing when you decide not to vote.
I totally am with you. I am heartened by, there was a town hall last week, and you may have seen it, that Joe Biden held in Philadelphia, and there was a young brother who got up and asked a question, and, you know, he was kind of asking it, and I was like, whoa, you know, I detected maybe a little hostility or frustration or whatever it might have been. And he seemed a little unconvinced, but the next day he was on, I think, CNN with Don Lemon, and he said he was going to vote for Joe Biden, and he had considered all the things. He had a conversation with himself, and he's going to meet with Joe, and he is talking to other people, hopefully, to get them to vote too, because that is a thing. We've got some youth who feel a little alienated. But my question is, alongside of this, Dr. Avis, is about the Black press, about the Black media. Yeah. What role we can play, what role the Black media, the Black press can play. It's a very important role. It's a critical role. You look at all the people I've mentioned. I did Joe Madison, Roland Martin, your organization, Karen Hunter, Clay Kane, a number of other people I've not even mentioned.
And you.
Thank you.
And you.
Thank you.
Don't leave that
out. Thank you.
Yes.
Myself.
There you go. Step into the spotlight, brother. That's right. Take that shine. Yes.
You make me laugh. I can't stop.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good though.
Totally broke your train of thought. I get your question. I mean, it is absolutely essential. The Black press is essential. Listen, information is power. People who have control over information have the ability to control thoughts. They have the ability to control minds, and therefore they have the ability to control actions. And that's why when our media is suppressed and the only information that people are getting are from other platforms that do not have our interests at heart, that do not even center those issues that are important for us, or even worse, maybe spewing out toxic messaging towards us that makes us feel less than, that makes us feel hopeless, that makes us feel as if it's not even worth us trying from day to day. That is very, very damaging to all of our psyches, but especially for young people who are growing up in a world and trying to figure things out as they grow up and navigate. I can understand why young people are frustrated in this moment. I'm the mother of a 24-year-old and a 17-year-old. So I have a couple of young people that I love very dearly. Both of them are young men. And so I kind of have a bird's eye view of what young Black men are experiencing right now. Obviously not directly from the perspective of a young Black man, but as a mother to two young Black men, I can understand where that frustration comes from, because they are still facing a world that is very hostile to them. They're still facing a world that it's very frustrating to me. I have to say, I hope this doesn't go off on too much of a tangent, but as my boys were small, I knew what they would face as they got bigger. You know, it's like, you know, when our children are small and cute and brilliant and just smiles that light up the world, you know, they go walking down the street and people are so sweet and nice to them. And I know, give my son 10 more years, you're going to be crossing the street to get away from him. Now I think, what is that going to do to his spirit? How can I protect his spirit so that he knows that when the world rejects him, it is not his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. There is no deficit inside of him. That's that person's problem. That's that person's fault. It's not your fault. So I put a lot of effort in my sons as they were younger. First of all, to arm them with knowledge of their history, because I think that's critically important, but also to really get them to love themselves. And I literally think of it as I was trying to build for them a suit of armor that would allow them to navigate a hostile society in a way that would not only allow them to survive it and thrive and do well in these spaces out here, but also to love themselves. To me, that's the most revolutionary act in a society that is this hateful and hate-filled, specifically towards Black men. So I understand as best I can, not being a Black man, why Black men in particular would be frustrated with this society. I get it. But I also want to say to my brothers that we need you. We need you. Speaking now as a Black woman, we need you. Right. We don't want to do this by ourselves.
Right.
We don't want to do this by ourselves.
Right.
We have a linked fate. When I win, you win. When you win, I win. That's really what we need. That's the mindset we all need to have as we move forward. And though things have not shifted as fast as any of us would have liked it to, I would say that things have improved, for example, from where we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. If you're 20 now, though, and you've not lived through those past experiences, I can understand how right now you're like, but we're still facing X, Y, Z, and we are. And that's particularly why we need you right now. The biggest message I would give my young brothers is, when we say we want you to vote, it's not that we're saying we only want you to vote. Hear me on that. When we say we want you to show up at the polls and fight for people who come closest to your interests, knowing that there is no perfect candidate. Hell, there's no perfect human being. Right. So if you're looking for perfection, it ain't going to exist. Let me just be the first one to tell you that right now. Your job as an adult who is making an adult decision is to figure out which of these options comes closest to advancing my interest. And then after the vote, you then go harder. That's when you make that person do what you want them to do. But who are you going to have to do? Who is already starting out closer? So it's less pushing that you have to do to get there, as opposed to one who is much, much further away, right? It's just like what Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. So that demand part is the second leg of the journey after the vote, to me. Of course, you have it before the vote. Everybody gets all enamored with these agendas. Let me give you a secret about agendas. As someone who has worked in the DC public policy space for over 20 years, my entire career has been in that space. Agendas ain't worth shit. I hope I can.
Really you can. No worries.
People are getting so flummoxed about these agendas. It's a freaking piece of paper. Really. Let's just get real about it. Power is how you make things move in Washington, D.C. Power. And oftentimes power is unseen. In fact, I would argue most of the time, power is unseen. It is the pressure that you put on people after they are in the position to get you what you want, that gets you what you want. All right? So anybody can say, yes, I have an agenda. Anybody can write something on 2 pages. Now, what are you going to do to make something happen after that person gets into office? And so the point that the thing that I really want our young brothers to understand is we do want you to vote, but we also want you to be there after the election to put that pressure on elected officials, every area of the the legislative system, right? Not just the president, but all the way down to city council, right, school board, the whole thing, dog catcher, I don't care. You put pressure on people after the election to make them either live up to their promises if they promised you something for your vote, or even if someone won that you did not vote for, put pressure on them to get whatever it is you want done. But the easier way to do it is to move towards that person who at least is closer to your interests in the first place. I know I'm rambling. One last thing.
No, that's okay. Not rambling at all. This is great.
I think it's important for people to understand, although a lot of these things that are on these plans, especially, for example, Ice Cube's plan, already exist. This is why I think people really understand how Washington works. A lot of these things that already exist have been passed into law. Well, not law, but have been passed as a bill out of the House by, oftentimes led by members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and are now sitting in what Mitch McConnell himself calls his graveyard. There are over 400 bills right now that have been passed by the House and are in the Senate that he refuses to move on. One I will lift up, the Justice and Policing Act, George Floyd Act, has many of the things that a lot of young people in particular have been pushing for, right? Has things like banning no-knock warrants, has things like creating a national registry of police officers who are abusive so that a police officer can't just leave one jurisdiction after they get fired and go to another jurisdiction. It allows us the ability to literally sue police officers and not just cities. Because I believe a lot of what's happening right now is because police officers have no skin in the game. They know that the city will just pay up a couple of $1 million and they still keep their jobs. How about if somebody kills one of our babies, then damn it, we're going to get their house, we're going to get their car, they're going to be paying us for the rest of their life. That allows that in that bill. There are so many other provisions in that bill that are things that we have been saying that we wanted. And in fact, that appear in a lot of these agendas. You know how that becomes law? When you have a democratically controlled Senate and a Democrat in the White House, because the Republicans, including Donald Trump, have done nothing to pass it. And so this is why I'm saying it is very dangerous when you have someone who has a big platform, who wants to make things sound really simple and are outreaching to people who may not have, I understand, my whole life, honestly, is really tied up in politics for years. So I know the minutia. Most everybody else is just concerned about living. They're going to work every day. They're doing everything they can to keep a roof over their heads, especially right now. So they're not paying attention to everything that's happening. It's not to say that they don't have the capacity, they just don't have the time, okay? But it's just not their interest. And so they can easily be misled by misinformation, half information, things that sound good, but not really know really the full state of affairs. So what I'm suggesting is it is dangerous. And there are people who sometimes are using your inability to focus on this right now as a weakness in order for them to advance their own interests that they have yet to divulge for you. So just to tie this in a bow, for all of those reasons, let's vote. And then after November 3rd, let's do what we have to do in order to exert the pressure that's necessary to push through those things that we care about most into law. And we're going to need it. Trust and believe. There's a lot of work to do.
I really appreciate what you're saying and what you've said here, and also especially what you said in the last few moments, and about power and about pushing, because I've talked about that here a lot in this podcast. What we have to do is to keep pushing people, keep pushing those in power. We have two examples I can think of off the top of my head of someone in the White House, FDR saying to A. Philip Randolph, make me do it. LBJ saying to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., make me do it. And, they and the movements behind them responded, and so many unsung people responded. Amelia Boynton responded, Diane Nash responded. Well, so many other people responded, and I do appreciate what you've just said about that. I want to just ask you, just a final couple of things to consider, because you kind of answered things about the Black agenda. I was going to ask you about what you think the Black agenda is, and you've kind of touched on some of that, or quite a lot of it. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say about it beyond what you've already said, which I think is really important about the Black family, keeping that infrastructure in place, rallying the young Black men and other Black men who may be not so young to really be aware of what's at stake. All of those things that are very important. So I'm really thankful that you mentioned them. But is there anything else that you wanted to add about the Black agenda, about things that we really need to do to mobilize? Of course, this election is 11 voting days away. Your thoughts about all of that?
Yeah, well, vote early is the first thing I want to say. Vote early and in person, because I do not trust this fool, okay? I don't trust him as far as I can throw him, and that would not be very far, okay? Don't trust him. I just voted yesterday, in fact. So just please just go. If you can do it early, go do it early. That said, I would say just about the agenda, to me, there are lots of things that obviously the Black community needs. For me, the strategy, me sort of leaning back into sort of my political strategist hat, I really think that it would be useful. So here, I'll say this from a couple of different perspectives. We have historically done tremendous work in this nation to make it a little bit more closer to its founding ideals. We have done the lion's share of work that have changed the whole sort of timbre of this nation in terms of its culture as well as its laws, to make it more inclusive and a little bit closer to fairness. We have done the lion's share of that work, and we've opened up doors for every other group of people because of the work that we've done. Our blood has paved the way for what level of equality we do have now, knowing that we still have further to go. I will say, though, in most recent years, when you're seeing other movements and successes that they've had, and even when you look at ours, what's most typically effective in creating change at the macro level like that is to have maybe like one ask at a time, like one or two asks at a time, focus like a laser on those things, win those, and then keep moving forward, So, maybe one of the most sort of recent ones we can think of is, for example, the LGBTQ community and their push for gay marriage. It was like they didn't ask for 50 bazillion things. They asked for gay marriage. And it was a very concerted effort that led to the changes that were necessary, that did things across this nation, changed laws across this nation, all the way up to a Supreme Court case that made that a reality. The one bit of caution I would give my community is that sometimes we can do ourselves a disservice when our agendas are so broad and our asks are so diffuse that it's hard to make any significant progress on anything. We get power by concentrating our efforts in as few things possible so that we can push those things further along to victory, rather than having our power diffused among many things where there is little progress on anything. So, for example, if our main initial ask is we want the Justice and Policing Act to be passed in the first 100 days, that needs to be what our focus is. Boom, that. Let's do that now. And then after that, what's our next priority? What's our next priority? That's to me how things work in Washington, D.C. It works with power and concentrated power. It's kind of like, water is probably the most powerful one, maybe next to fire, but water is probably, I would say, one of the most powerful elements on earth, right?
Right.
But when you think about, water can literally cut concrete, but it has to be concentrated. It has to be a concentrated stream of water flowing at high velocity to cut concrete. But if it's a bucket of water and you just throw it there and it diffuses its power all over the place, that concrete will stand. And what I'm suggesting is the way power works in pushing change is the same way. We need to concentrate our power as a community on just one or two things. Not the full agenda is good to have in terms of we know that these are all the things that we need to work on. But I believe if we really want to create change, the most effective way is for us to determine what's our first priority. Let's get that done. And then we'll continue to move down the list like that. Because just putting out documents, just putting out agendas to say that we have agenda does nothing. If you want to create change, let's think strategically, what's our priority? And now let's galvanize our power in order to make that thing real. That's how you create change. And that's what we have the power to do when we vote and when we act beyond the vote.
I totally agree. And one last thing I do want to say before I forget her name as well. Tamika Mallory has done a lot of great work. That's a sister that I have to mention. I mean, I know I've forgotten a whole lot of others, and I apologize to you all. But yes. Tamika Mallory has been doing work out here on these streets, as they say. And
she is a fierce woman. I'm so proud of her. She's incredible.
Yeah. Final thing, for the benefit of everybody listening, I wanted to ask you to give out your social media, website, all that good stuff. And I'm going to put a link to all this in the liner notes of this episode, but I want you to get that out as well, please, right now, if you can.
Absolutely. So, because this is funny, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but, I'm not a Gemini, but I do tend to have multiple personalities on social media.
Okay.
So, I'm those kind of out there personalities on Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm like no holds barred. Okay? No holds barred on Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm Sister with an H, SISTAH, Sister Scholar on Twitter. On other social media platforms, I'm Avis Jones DeWeever. Except for on Instagram, this is bad. I need to make this uniform. I know this is horrible branding. I'm the real Dr. Avis on Instagram. However, for websites, I think probably the easiest one for people to remember is blackwomenlead.com. You can get information about my book there, and from there you can get more information about how to contact me if you want to contact me for anything. So that's basically it.
Wonderful. It's so great to have you on, Dr. Avis. Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever, just fantastic. Co-founder of Max Black Media. Really a great honor to talk to you today. Thank you very much for coming on the Politicrat podcast.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Voters, it's time to know your rights. Know that history is on your side. History has given you the right to vote. Voters, see yourself during the most important election of our time. See yourself casting your ballot and not letting anyone or anything stand in your way. See yourself as the voter with the most powerful voice, the voice of the disabled voter, the voice of the young first-time voter, the voice of an experienced senior citizen, the voice that is black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, the voter that is straight, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, non-binary. You are the American voter who cannot be suppressed. Voters, it's time that you know casting your ballot isn't difficult at all. You just have to know your rights. Voters, you have the right to a free and fair election. That's why our voice will not be suppressed. Your vote is your voice. Call or text 866-OUR-VOTE for more information on your voting rights.
The coronavirus.
This is their new hoax. We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear.
When you have 15 people, and within a couple of days it's going to be down to close to zero, we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum.
I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised if I understand it.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Priorities USA Action is responsible for the content of this ad.
There is only one America. No Democratic rivers. No Republican mountains. Just this great land and all that's possible on it with a fresh start. Cures we can find. Futures we can shape. Work to reward. Dignity to protect. There is so much we can do if we choose to take on problems and not each other, and choose a president who brings out our best. Joe Biden doesn't need everyone in this country to always agree. Just to agree we all love this country and go from there.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
This year's election is going to be a little different.
Instead of one election day, we now have a voting season.
That special time of year when polls can open weeks before Election Day.
When your mailbox can become a voting booth.
When how you vote is just as important as who you vote for.
How, when, and where to cast your ballot depends on your state.
'Tis the season to be prepared.
This year, plan your vote.
Special thanks once again to Dr. Avis Jones DeWeever. And it was really terrific to have her on as a guest of this edition of the Politicrat podcast. Make sure you vote. If you haven't already done so, please vote now. Over 53 million people have already voted here in the United States. Are you one of them? Or be one of them? Vote now. Thanks very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.